I'm Vinny Politan. The subject of my investigation is the case of the accused Gilgo Beach, Long Island serial killer. It's a case that has taken decades to develop and one where many never thought there would be a trial, but it's going to happen. Here's the story. Along the windswept shores of Long Island, a dark secret slept beneath the sand. For more than a decade, the remains of young women, escorts, mothers, daughters were unearthed near Gilgo Beach. Their lives silenced and their stories buried. The community was haunted by whispers of a calculating predator, someone who blended into suburban life while carrying out unimaginable acts of violence. Investigators pieced together a chilling puzzle: burner phones, burlap wrappings, and digital trails leading back to an unsuspecting home. The suspect, once seen as ordinary, was anything but. In court, prosecutors describe a monster hiding in plain sight. Neighbors recall a man who waved, smiled, and kept his secrets buried deep. As the trial looms, Gilgo Beach remains more than a crime scene. It is a graveyard of innocence and a reminder of how evil can live quietly among us, masked by the comfort of normalcy. I remember when this story was breaking, when all these bodies were turning up on Gilgo Beach, and it was shocking. And it was a case like, what's going on here? Like, is there a serial killer on the loose? We need to catch him. And then all of a sudden, the case went seemingly cold, where there was no activity. And then every once in a while, the people would be drumming up some noise about why isn't anything happening. And then we'd hear, well, someone else is taking over the investigation. Things are going to happen. And still, it took so long. But then finally, we got word from the DA, Ray Tierney. Take a listen.
My office filed a superseding indictment charging the defendant Yerman with a seventh charged murder in the second degree for the murder of Valerie Mack, which occurred in 2000. I remind everyone that all of these cases and all of these murders are just allegations, and we look forward to proving them in court. As I've previously stated, the work of the Gilgo Task Force is ongoing and continuing, and when I said that, I meant what I said. The defendant is now charged with the murder of 7 young women: Sandra Castilla from 1993, Valerie Mack from 2000, Jessica Taylor from 2003, Maureen Brainerd Barnes from 2007, Melissa Bartholomew from 2009, Megan Waterman from 2010 in June, and Amber Costello from September of 2010.
It took a while to get all 7 of those charges, superseding indictment after superseding indictment, but now you hear it. And he's going to be tried for all 7 at the same time. But it took so long to get there, which brings us to our first question in our investigation tonight, which is an important one, right? How did they catch the accused killer? Right? It took long. Why did it take so long? But how did they end up catching the accused killer? Here to help answer that question, forensic death investigator Joseph Scott Morgan. He's also the host of the extremely popular Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan podcast. Also joining us, former New York police officer, retired police lieutenant, commanding officer of the Nassau County Police K-9 unit, Mike Gould, is with us. Great to have both of you here. Before we start talking about it, I want to listen to a little bit more from the DA, because he has provided some of the details through the years. Let's take a listen.
The murderer, the defendant Yerman, he got a cell phone and a burner phone, which is prepaid and anonymous. And for each of the murders, he got an individual burner phone, and he used that to communicate with the victims. Then shortly after the death of the victims, he then would get rid of the burner phone. And right away in December of 2012, FBI CAST analysts, special agents with the CAST unit of the FBI, they immediately began looking at that cell site data. They compared the victims' phones with the burner phones, and they immediately honed in on some similarities, specifically in the Massapequa Park area, and they looked at an area of a confluence of 4 cell towers. And they realized that this had significance because the perpetrator of these crimes was probably located within this area at or around the times of the murder. The FBI also managed to do that for an area in Midtown Manhattan. There was a hair recovered from Maureen Brainerd Barnes from a belt buckle that was around her legs. With regard to Megan Waterman, there were 3 hairs recovered from her, one from around her head area, one from around her leg area in the burlap, and then there was one caught in between the tape. And that was recovered. Amber Costello also had a significant hair that was recovered during the time of the recovery. There was an abandonment sample obtained from the defendant via the pizza box, and the pizza that was in the pizza box, a DNA profile was obtained from that pizza. Subsequent to the defendant's arrest, a buccal swab was taken of the defendant. A DNA profile was obtained from that buccal swab, and the buccal swab of the defendant matches the DNA profile from that of the abandonment sample in the pizza box. A first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche with a very unique feature that was between it's a pickup truck, so it was between the cab and the bed, and that was identified. Again, that was back in 2010. But it wasn't until March of 2022 that database was searched by the task force, and this individual was identified. That individual was Rex Sherman, the defendant.
All right. I'll start with you, Mike Gould. This case, for more than a decade, we were waiting, but it seems a lot of the information was there in the beginning. If you're talking about cell phones and a very unique vehicle.
Yeah, Vinny, thanks for having me. Yeah, so this is something very familiar to me. I'm very familiar with Gilgo Beach. In fact, ironically, I used to train police dogs all along there because it's desolate. And it's a great place to train dogs, particularly cadaver dogs. So that was in the late 90s, of course. But what happened in this case, since 2010, when the first victim was found by a cadaver dog, one of my colleagues in the Suffolk County Police Department, who was really terrific dog handler and had a great dog, was able to find the first victim. So, but then it went cold. There was a lot of allegations of police corruption. A police chief out here got fired and went to jail, not necessarily tied to this case, but he was implicated. He was the suspect of that. There was the district attorney. He went to jail. So there was a lot of things. This new task force, fortunately, a new police commissioner, a new DA, and they really reinvigorated the investigation. But if it wasn't for the cadaver dog that found them, they wouldn't have that evidence. So it was really tremendous what the work has done by the task force in the last few years of putting all this digital evidence together.
You know, Joseph Scott Morgan, so it seems that they use this, the Chevy Avalanche in coordination with some of the cell phone data, and they kind of zero in on this guy. And then, of all things, in the city of New York, to positively identify the suspect in their eyes, of course, it was pizza crust.
Famous phrase? I don't know. Yeah, so, yeah, you got to have the pie, man. And, yeah, you know, you think about this abandonment sample, you know, where it's anybody's game on at that point in time. You leave this behind. And, of course, you know, this is kind of unpleasant to say, I know, forgive me, but, you know, when you eat something, you're going to deposit you know, spittle on the crust that's remaining, assuming that that's where they got the sample from as opposed to touch DNA. And then they go in and they do the buccal mucosal swab to confirm that. You know, once you have that, once you have that foundation of those DNA building blocks, you can go out and you can create a more robust case. You go back in and you recover these hair samples that are familial hair samples, and then you begin to think about this in terms of genetic genealogy, which we've heard a lot about over the past few years, haven't we, Ben? And so you build a case out with that. And here's the thing, along with the cellular data that you have, which deals in numbers, obviously, because you're pinging, you have specific locations, and then these astronomical numbers that you're talking about with DNA fingerprinting. I'm not saying it's a slam dunk. However, I think that it's a very difficult hill for the defense to climb.
Some of the other things that witnesses have said through the years in identifying the truck and the drivers, that it was a very large man. This guy does not he's not going to disappear in a crowd. He's going to stick out. This guy is huge, and knowing what we know, we have a certain perception of him. But I think that's another part of this case that is very unique and very incriminating, Mike.
Yeah. Yeah. So he was described by a witness as an ogre, 6'6". So right, he stood out. But remember, he was like a very prominent. He lived literally 2 miles, as the crow flies, from the burial sites or the disposal sites. So, and he was a prominent architect. Traveled back and forth to New York from Massapequa Park every day. And, it's kind of eerie to know that this person lived in this kind of bedroom community of Long Island. Went to work every day, and they missed him. There was a lot of theories for the 10 or 12 years that transpired. There was a lot of theories, again, pointing to the police department, pointing to a bunch of different theories, but they never had this. So the police did magnificent. I agree with Joseph. This is a hard, it's a digital scientific case that they have to prove. I think it's going to be a battle of experts when it comes down to the DNA and, so yeah, I think they have a very strong case. The attorney is terrific. Michael Brown is very charismatic. He's like a pit bull, so to speak. And so we'll see how it ends up.
Absolutely. All right, guests are sticking around.
I bartend in Massapequa, which is just north of Massapequa Park. When I heard the name Rex Heuermann, and then I finally saw what he looked like, I said, I think I've actually served this guy before.
When Rex got arrested at Massapequa Park and I realized how close it was to my house, it was very crazy because I ended up seeing the address blowing up all over online, and my friend and I actually drove to the house, and we realized it's like 5 minutes away from where I live, which was crazy just knowing the fact that somebody capable of doing something like that lived so close to me, and all this time nobody had any idea about it.
There was a lot of shock in that neighborhood. Let me tell you, this is a nice neighborhood, a real nice neighborhood in Massapequa Park on Long Island, where the accused killer was living with his family. Now, I want you to take a listen to his attorney. We've been talking about it. He's got a very good attorney, a very credible attorney. Here's Michael J. Brown talking about his client.
It's extremely circumstantial in nature. In terms of speaking to my client, the only thing I can tell you that he did say as he was in tears was, I didn't do this. We obviously don't have any evidence. This is the beginning of the case. Everybody is presumed innocent in our country. There's a presumption of innocence, and we're looking forward to fighting this case in a court of law.
So a lot of the evidence has now gotten into the hands of the defense, and they understand what the prosecutor's case is, which brings us to the next question in our investigation. What is the accused killer's defense? What's the defense to this? Can take many different forms. We see it all the time here on Court TV. Here to help with our investigation is former New York police officer, retired police lieutenant, commanding officer of the Nassau County Police K-9 Unit, Mike Gould, and still with us, the attorney representing the children of the accused killer, Ves Matev, is with us. All right, Ves, how would you describe the defense here? What is the defense going to be in front of the jury?
The defense has a Sisyphean task ahead of them in light of the last two rulings by the judge in this case, which obviously denied the motion for separate trials and for the exclusion of the DNA, which we touched on earlier in the show. So, you know, anytime you have a defense like this, you want to almost atomize it. You want to break it down to every single instance. You don't want the big picture getting in front of the jury. You want to break down every single act, every single interaction, every single occurrence into its most, black and white components, and taking into single frames, from a bunch of single frames into the movie. The prosecution wants to show you a movie. They want to show you a story. They want to paint a picture, hence the adverse inferences upon adverse inferences that we talked about earlier. And that's why the DNA is so key to their case, because you have this completely novel, untested, previously inadmissible methodology now taking center stage in what is arguably the biggest trial in New York's history, certainly this century. So the defense's strategy is to do the exact same thing they've done at the hearings, but in front of a jury of his peers, which is to attack this methodology, how it was procured, the lack of credibility scientifically around it, and just to hammer the point that this is all circumstantial. At the end of the day, all you need is one, and you want to build the record for appeal. So this is a trial where I think we know where it's going, obviously at the trial level, but this is a trial where you have to build the record for appeal because, again, horrific facts usually make horrific law.
Now, another part of this case and this investigation was it took so long, and a lot of that had to do with the police. Take a look. Let's talk about James Burke. He's the former New York police, he's the police chief out there. This is all from Newsweek. Burke did not view the murder investigation as a high priority. He discouraged collaboration with other law enforcement agencies. He denied subpoenas for records related to cell phone towers. But this is the big one. He also faced internal investigations for allegations of drug use, engaging in relationships with sex workers. Did you hear that one? Engaging in relationships with sex workers. Who were the victims in all these, in this case? Sex workers, and other misconduct during his time as chief. He resigned in 2015, was federally charged for allegedly beating a man in handcuffs. Mike Gould, how concerned are you about what the jury might think if they find out about former Chief James Burke and his alleged relationships with sex workers?
Yeah, Benny, I think he will be if Michael Brown can introduce these stories. Yeah, he was a dirty cop, and he went to jail for police misconduct. So he was a suspect, at least in the eyes of the community. And he tarnished the reputation for 10 years of the good, hard-working people of the Suffolk County Police Department. So this story has been going around and round and round for years here on Long Island. So the jury pool, I think they're certainly going to take that into consideration. One point I wanted to make from that area of Jones Beach, Gilgo Beach, that's a notorious organized crime dumping ground because of its proximity to Kennedy Airport, the Belt Parkway. So as far as New York is concerned, you can drive 10 miles and dump a body. So that has been a dumping ground for 30 years. But to the question is, this is going to be a battle of the experts, DNA experts, new technology, and they're going to battle it out, and they have to establish reasonable doubt. That's what the defense attorney is going to do. He doesn't need to even put up a defense, but that's where they're going to attack this. But I still think it's an uphill battle for sure.
Yeah, I think we're all agreeing on that. Vess, so in looking at the case, to me it seems like it's what I refer to as reasonable doubt is the standard in every case. I get it, but some of the trials we cover here, the defense or the defense team is pointing the jury in another direction. That hey, there's suspicion over here, there's suspicion over there. To me, is there any of that? Do you suspect there'll be any of that? Could it be pointed at the people who are in charge of the investigation themselves?
Yeah, so if you're out here on the North Fork and in Suffolk County especially, everybody knows the players that were just referenced, the former DA, the former police chief. There's a former gentleman serving time, also connected tangentially. The last panelist referred to a doctor named Dr. Hackett. So certainly you could do that. I don't think that's Mike Brown's strategy. As he's always said, he gets straight to the point. And the point here is, again, that since it's a very, very decades-old case, the DNA evidence is completely novel, right? And it's the old adage, at some point, science becomes indistinguishable from magic. That's a nice little phrase, but that's literally the argument that he's making. He's saying, basically, this is so novel, you cannot possibly, once you hear how they arrived at their conclusion, a reasonable juror could say, hey, maybe there's something more to this here. And again, I believe his strategy is to preserve the record for appeal, because if there's a trial on this, there's going to be an appeal on this, as sure as I sit here today.
Ves Matev, it's always great to have you on the program. Great to see you tonight. Mike Gould, obviously, on all the time as well. Thanks so much for your insight and your valuable time tonight. Now, every case, every trial has at least two sides, and I'm sure the accused killer will put on a very vigorous defense. The biggest problem, though, is all of the murders will be tried at once. And even if there may be doubt about one, will it be enough to raise doubt for all the cases, all the victims? Me, I doubt it. But you never really know until the case is tried. I've been surprised before. I'm Vinny Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.